Okay, you know what time it is. Midterm season is here, and if you're in engineering, yeah, the pressure is definitely on. So let's just cut through all the noise and really hone in on the details that matter.
Look, we're not about to rehash all the basics you already know. Think of this as a high-speed drill, especially for those quizzes that are graded on the curve. We're going to focus on the tricky stuff, the little bits of trivia, those gotcha questions that can be the difference between a good grade and a great one. You ready? Let's do this.
First up, the numbers game. This is just a rapid-fire round of key numbers. You know, the exact kind of digits that are perfect for a multiple-choice question you might otherwise just skim right past. First number you need to know, 48. This one is huge for your future career. It's the number of months of supervised work experience you need for your professional engineer license, your PE. That's 48 months. Burn it into your brain. Next up, 1023. When you see this number, your brain should immediately scream Arduino. Specifically, it's for analog read. Why? Well, because the Arduino has a 10-bit analog to digital converter, which means it spits out a value from 0 all the way up to 1023. Simple as that. And right on its heels, its tricky little cousin, 255. This is the max value for analog write. Do not get these two mixed up. It's a classic mistake. Reading an analog pin gets you that big range, 0 to 1023. But writing a simulated analog signal using pulse width modulation, that only gets you a range of 0 to 255. So the input range is way bigger than the output range. Remember that. All right, let's switch over to the physical world. 0.2 millimeters. Just remember, this is your magic number, your go-to clearance when you're 3D printing parts that have to fit together. I mean, if you model them to be perfectly flush, you are going to be sanding for hours, trust me. A 0.2 millimeter gap is really the sweet spot for a nice, smooth assembly right off the printer. And our last number for this round, 50%. This one points to the single biggest weakness of most 3D prints. They're anisotropic. In plain English, their strength isn't the same in all directions. The bond between the layers is only about half as strong as the filament strand itself. So what's the takeaway? You have to orient your parts so that the forces are not trying to pull those layers apart. Okay, next section. We're talking about concepts that are super easy to confuse. If you can get these pairs straight in your head, it's just an easy way to snag some extra marks. First pair, equality versus equity. They sound kind of similar, but they are worlds apart. Equality is all about fair inputs, giving everyone the exact same box to stand on. But equity, that's about fair outcomes. It's about making sure everyone gets the right size box so they can all see over the fence. So equality treats everyone the same, while equity addresses their unique needs to get a fair result. Next, let's talk about affordances and signifiers. A chair, for example, affords sitting. That's the relationship that makes the action possible. But the shape of the seat, the curve of the back, those are signifiers. They're clues that communicate how and where you're supposed to sit. The affordance is the possibility, the signifier is the hint. Now let's talk teamwork, because this one is so important. Task conflict versus relationship conflict. Task conflict is when you disagree about ideas or the work itself, and believe it or not, that can actually be a good thing. It can lead to a better outcome. But relationship conflict, we're talking personal friction, tension between people, that is always negative. It's totally destructive to a team. So a little debate about the task, healthy. Arguments about personalities, nope. One more for all you 3D printing fans, brim versus skirt. A skirt is that little outline it draws around your part before it starts. It's just to get the filament flowing smoothly. A brim, on the other hand, is actually attached to your part to give it a wider base for better adhesion. Here's the simple rule. Always use a skirt, but you only really need a brim for those tall, skinny parts that look like they might fall over. All right, time for a vocabulary round. Knowing these acronyms and terms isn't just about sounding smart, right? It's about really understanding the core concepts that they stand for. First up, PEO. That's Professional Engineers Ontario. They're the regulatory body. And if you remember only one thing about PEO, make it this. Their paramount duty, their number one job above all else, is to protect the public welfare. Not engineers, not companies, the public. Next, PWM, or pulse width modulation. This is just a brilliant example of how we get around a hardware limitation. See, Arduinos can't produce a true analog voltage. So what do? They use PWM to chop up a digital signal, basically turning it on and off super fast to simulate different voltage levels. It's a really clever fake-out. Okay, FDM, fused deposition modeling. This is just the official fancy term for the kind of 3D printing most of us are familiar with, melting plastic filament and building something layer by layer. And here's a fun little trivia bit for you. The term was actually trademarked, which is why you'll often see people use the alternative, fused filament fabrication, or FFF. And finally, a really great piece of design jargon, the gulf of execution. You know that feeling when you pick up a new device and you just stare at it thinking, okay, how do I even make this thing work? That feeling is the gulf of execution. And it's the designer's job to build a bridge over that gulf to make it obvious how to use it. All right, for our last section, let's zoom out a little and look at some key models and methods. Think of these as the frameworks that give structure to our actions, our ideas, and how we work with other people. First, we have the 7-stage action cycle. This is the loop our brain goes through for basically any action. It all starts with a goal. Then you have to cross what's called the bridge of execution. You plan, you specify, and you perform the action. Then, after you've done the thing, you cross the bridge of evaluation. You perceive what happened, you interpret it, and then you compare the result to your original goal. So that's goal, plan, specify, perform, perceive, interpret, compare. Next up, the affinity diagram, also known as the KJ process. This is brainstorming with structure. It's not just a free-for-all. You start by yourself generating ideas individually. Then you share them, and, this is the key part, you silently group similar ideas into clusters. After that, you vote on the best clusters, and only then do you discuss and combine the strongest ideas. It's a great way to go from a bunch of individual thoughts to one refined group solution. And last but not least, the ACT model for receiving feedback. It is so simple, but it is incredibly powerful. The next time someone gives you criticism, just remember to ACT. A is for accept, just be open. Don't argue, just listen. C is for clarify, ask questions, ask for specific examples. And T is for thank. Always thank the person for taking the time to give you that feedback. It's just a totally professional and constructive way to handle criticism. So we've just blitzed through a ton of numbers, jargon, and models. You've got the details. But here's the final question to think about. Can you connect them all? Can you see how knowing about a 0.2 millimeter clearance is actually part of good design? Or how understanding equity informs your ethical duty to the public? Or how avoiding relationship conflict helps you and your team build better things? That is the real system of good engineering practice. Now go ace that midterm. Good luck.